stop scrolling. I mean it. Put your damn phone down and pay attention because what I'm about to tell you is the biggest geopolitical shift in 40 years. And if you click away to watch another stupid dance video or whatever the hell is trending now, you deserve to stay ignorant about why gas prices are about to explode and why we might finally be done with the endless wars in the Middle East. On February 28th, President Donald Trump did what every other president for the last 4 decades didn't have the balls to do. He authorized strikes that took out Khomeini, the supreme leader of Iran, if you've been living under a rock for the past few weeks, along with a bunch of other top Iranian officials. He just eliminated them. Ended the regime that's been funding terrorism, destabilizing the Middle East, and threatening America since 1979. And the response? Iran lost their minds. They launched drone and missile attacks across the Gulf. They hit Saudi Arabia's Ras Tanura oil refinery, the largest oil refinery in Saudi Arabia, on, March 2nd. Shut it down completely. That's going to affect global oil prices. That means it's going to affect your wallet. But here's what I want you to understand. This has been going on for 40 years. And the strikes that we've done on Iran have been coming for 40 years. 40 years of weak presidents who didn't have the courage to actually deal with Iran. 40 years of American soldiers dying in the Middle East conflicts because we've been playing games instead of eliminating the actual source of the problem. Trump ended that in one strike, took out the leadership of the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism. And I'm going to spend the next 60 to 90 minutes explaining why this is the best thing that could have happened. Why every other president failed to do it. How Democrats have kept us dependent on Middle East oil because of their own corruption. Why Israel's control of global affairs is the real problem, and why Saudi Arabia needs to step up as the new leader of the Middle East so we can finally focus on actual threats, China and Russia, instead of being stuck in this hellhole for another 40 years. This is it. This is the conversation about what's really happening and why it matters. So, sit down, shut up, and actually pay attention for once.
Courage, compassion, faith, freedom, truth. Welcome to Courage in the Darkness with your host, Philip Roberts. It's time to awaken America.
Let me lay out exactly what just happened because the media is doing everything they can to confuse you and make this seem more complicated than it is. On February 28th, 2026, the United States conducted military strikes in Iran. These weren't random targets. These weren't send a message strikes. These were decapitation strikes designed to eliminate the leadership in the Iranian regime. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, dead. The supreme leader who's been running Iran since 1989, who's been funding Hezbollah and Hamas and every other terrorist organization in the Middle East, who's been orchestrating attacks on American forces and American interests for decades, gone. Along with him, multiple senior Iranian officials, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps leadership, the people running Iran's nuclear program, the people coordinating with proxy forces across the region, all eliminated in coordinated strikes. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't collateral damage. This was a deliberate decision to cut the head off the snake that's been poisoning the Middle East since the 1979 revolution. Now, let me tell you why this took courage that no other president had. Every president since Jimmy Carter has had to deal with Iran. Every single one. And every single one of them chose options that didn't actually solve the problem. Reagan dealt with the hostage crisis aftermath in the Iran-Contra situation. He didn't eliminate the regime. Bush Sr. had the opportunity during the Gulf War, didn't take it. Clinton watched as Iran funded terrorism throughout the 90s, did nothing. Bush Jr. invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, countries on either side of Iran, and somehow never dealt with Iran itself, which was funding insurgents killing American soldiers in both countries. Obama gave them billions of dollars in the Iran nuclear deal, actually paid them, sent pallets of cash to the regime that chants death to America, gave them sanctions relief, helped them fund more terrorism. Trump, in his first term, pulled out of that disastrous deal. He took out Soleimani, the head of the Quds force, who was orchestrating attacks across the region. But the regime stayed in power. Biden went back to appeasing them, tried to restart the nuclear deal, gave them more money, allowed them to keep funding proxies, allowed them to keep developing their nuclear program. And now Trump, back in office, has done what none of them would do: eliminate the regime and the regime leadership and force a fundamental change in Iran. Why didn't the others do it? Because they lacked courage. They lacked vision. They were afraid of the consequences, afraid of the response, afraid of taking decisive action that might be controversial. Trump doesn't care about being controversial. Trump doesn't care what people have to say. He only cares about results. He cares about actually solving problems instead of managing them. For 40 years, American foreign policy in the Middle East has been about management. Contain Iran, negotiate with Iran, sanction Iran, give them incentives, give them money, try to moderate their behavior. None of it worked. Iran kept funding terrorism, kept developing nuclear weapons, kept threatening Israel and Saudi Arabia and American interests, kept killing Americans through their proxy wars. Management doesn't work with regimes that are ideologically committed to your destruction. Negotiation doesn't work with people who view compromises as weakness. Money doesn't moderate people who use it to fund more attacks. The only thing that works is eliminating the regime, forcing regime change, making it impossible for them to continue what they've been doing. And that's exactly what Trump did. That's what took courage. That's what no other president was willing to do. And yes, there are consequences. Iran responded with attacks. They hit the refinery in Saudi Arabia. They launched drones and missiles across the region. They're trying to disrupt oil production and global energy markets. But here's what you need to understand. Those consequences were always coming. Iran was always going to escalate. The question was whether we'd face that escalation from a position of strength with their leadership dead and their regime in chaos, or from a position of weakness with them fully in control. You know what? Trump chose strength. He chose to act first, eliminate their leadership, and force them to respond while they're dealing with internal chaos and succession struggles. Every other president chose weakness. They chose to let Iran dictate the terms. They chose to react to Iranian aggression instead of preempting it. The strikes on February 28th changed 40 years of failed policy. They ended the cycle of appeasement and management. They put Iran on the defensive for the first time since 1979. And despite all the hand-wringing from Democrats and the media, despite all the predictions of World War III and disaster, what's actually happening is that the Iranian regime is collapsing. Their leadership is dead. Their command structure is in chaos. Their ability to coordinate attacks is compromised. This is what victory looks like. This is what happens when you have a president with the courage to actually solve problems instead of managing them forever. Trump didn't start this war. Iran has been at war with America since 1979. He's finishing it. And it's about damn time. Now, let me address something that most people are too scared to talk about. Israel's role in all of this and why they're actually the number one problem in global affairs today. I know what you're thinking. Oh no, he's going to criticize Israel. He must be anti-Semitic. Save it. I don't care about your programmed responses. I care about truth. And the truth is that Israel controls more of global policy than any other nation and demands that everyone bows to them like they're on some kind of pedestal. I'm not scared to say it. Let's start with the facts. Israel has been bombing Iranian targets for years. They've conducted countless strikes in Syria, in Iraq, in Iran itself. And every time they do it, America is expected to support them. defend them, and deal with the consequences. Iran bombed Israel in this current conflict. You know what my response is? I don't really care. Israel can handle themselves. They've got one of the most advanced militaries in the world. They've got nuclear weapons. They've got the Iron Dome. They don't need American soldiers dying to protect them. But somehow, American foreign policy in the Middle East has been shaped for decades around protecting Israel's interests. We give them billions of dollars in military aid every year. We veto every UN resolution that criticizes them. We fight wars that primarily benefit their security while American soldiers pay the price. And you're not allowed to question it. You're not allowed to ask why American taxpayers fund their defense while we've got crumbling infrastructure at home. You're not allowed to point out that our Middle East policy is shaped more by what Israel wants than what America's interests require. If you raise these questions, you get called anti-Semitic. You get accused of hating Jews. You get targeted by lobbying organizations that'll try to destroy your career. I don't hate Jews. I'm talking about a government and its influence on American policy. And I'm not going to be silenced by accusations designed to shut down legitimate questions about why one small, insignificant country has so much control over American foreign policy. Israel treats America like a servant. Like we exist to do their bidding. Like our military is their military, and our resources are their resources. And American politicians on both parties fall all over themselves and pledge loyalty to Israel before they pledge loyalty to American interests. Why? Follow the money. Look at who donates to political campaigns. Look at who controls major lobbying organizations. Look at who shapes media narratives about the Middle East. Look at who is the power to make or break political careers based on whether you support their agenda. Israel has built a system where American politicians know they can't get elected or stay in office if they oppose Israeli interests. So they don't. They bow down. They pledge allegiance. They commit to funding Israeli defense no matter what it costs American taxpayers. This ain't how foreign policy is supposed to work. American policy should be about American interests. Our military should be used to protect American security, not to fight proxy wars for another country's regional dominance. And before anyone starts screaming, let me be clear. I'm not saying Israel doesn't have the right to exist or defend itself. They absolutely do. What I'm saying is they need to do it on their own dime with their own military, not ours. We've been stuck in the Middle East for 40 years because of commitments to Israel. We've invaded Iraq partly to eliminate the threat to Israel. We've fought in Afghanistan and Syria and dealt with Iran primarily because of Israel's security concerns. American soldiers have died. American taxpayers have spent trillions of dollars, all to protect Israeli interests. Well, we're told we can't afford healthcare, infrastructure, education, or anything else Americans actually need. This has to stop. Israel needs to stand on its own. They're a wealthy country with advanced technology and a capable military. They don't need to control American foreign policy. They don't need American soldiers fighting their battles. And American politicians need to start putting American interests first, instead of treating Israel like they're our overlords. The strikes on Iran, those were coordinated with Israel. Of course they were. Israel has been pushing for regime change in Iran for years. They've been conducting their own strikes. They've been trying to get America to do the heavy lifting of eliminating Iran so they don't have to do it. And Trump just did it. He eliminated the Iranian regime leadership, which serves Israeli interests. I'm not saying that it was wrong. Iran needed to be dealt with. But let's be honest about whose interests this serves and why it happened. What I care about, what should matter to every single American citizen, is how this affects us. How it affects whether we can finally get out of the Middle East or whether we're going to be stuck there forever. And that depends on whether we let Israel continue to dictate our foreign policy or whether we finally start making decisions based on American interests alone. The Iranian regime needed to be eliminated. That's good for America because they fund terrorism that targets Americans. But if the end result is that now we're more committed to protecting Israel, more involved in the Middle East conflicts, more dependent on maintaining military presence in the region, then we haven't actually solved anything. We need to be crystal clear. This operation was about American security, not Israeli security. We dealt with Iran because they're a threat to American interests, not just because Israel wanted us to. And moving forward, American policy in the Middle East needs to be about American interests, not Israeli interests, not being Israel's military, not bowing down to their demands. If that makes people uncomfortable, I don't care. It's time that someone said it. Israel is not more important than America. Their interests are not our interests, and we need to stop pretending otherwise. Now let's talk about why gas prices are about to explode and whose fault that is. Democrats and their corruption involving Saudi oil. Iran hit the Ras Tanura refinery in Saudi Arabia on March 2nd. This is the largest oil refinery in Saudi Arabia. It processes millions of barrels per day. and now it's shut down. That means less refined oil products hitting global markets. That means higher prices for gas, diesel, heating oil, everything derived from petroleum. That means you're going to have to pay more at the pump, more for transportation, more for everything that depends on fuel. And whose fault is that? Democrats, who have spent decades blocking American energy independence. We have the oil. We have the natural gas. We have the resources to be completely energy independent and never have to care about what happens to Saudi refineries or Middle Eastern oil production. But Democrats won't let us drill. They won't let us build pipelines. They won't let us develop our own resources. They claim it's about the environment, about climate change, about transitioning to renewables. That's a lie. It's about corruption. Democrats have their money invested in Saudi oil, not just the politicians, their donors, their lobbyists, the people who fund their campaigns and their foundations. They're all financially tied to Middle Eastern oil production. If America becomes energy independent, if we drill our own oil and use our own resources, the price of oil drops globally. Supply increases. Middle Eastern oil becomes less valuable. And all those investments that the Democrats and their cronies have in Saudi oil lose value. That, they can't allow that. So, they block American drilling while claiming it's about saving the planet. Meanwhile, they're perfectly fine with Saudi Arabia drilling and refining oil, with the environmental impact that entails, because that's where their money is. This is corruption. This is politicians putting their financial interests ahead of American security and American consumers. Energy dependence is a national security threat. When we rely on foreign oil, we're vulnerable to exactly what's happening right now. Disruptions in supply that spike prices that hurt American families. We saw it in the 1970s with the oil embargo. We saw it again in the 2000s with instability in the Middle East. And we're seeing it now with Iran targeting Saudi refining capacity. Every single time, their solution is the same: American energy independence. Drill our own oil. Build our own refineries. Use our resources so that we're not dependent on regions that are constantly in conflict. Trump understood this in his first term. He opened up drilling. He approved pipelines. He made America energy independent for the first time in generations. We were exporting oil instead of importing it. And what did Biden do? First day in office, he killed the Keystone Pipeline. He shut down drilling on federal lands. He made it harder to get permits for new energy. He did everything possible to make America dependent on foreign oil again. Why? Because his donors wanted it. Because the people who fund Democratic campaigns have investments in Saudi oil, and they needed America to keep buying instead of producing. Now, we're in a situation where Iranian attacks on Saudi infrastructure directly impacts American consumers. If we were energy independent, if we were producing our own oil and refining it ourselves, Iranian attacks on Saudi Arabia would be Saudi Arabia's problem, not ours. But because Democrats have made us dependent again, we're vulnerable. And if you're going to pay the price at the pump. This is what corruption looks like. This is what happens when politicians serve their donors instead of their constituents. This is why energy policy matters to national security. And here's the other part. Saudi Arabia has been a stabilizing force in that region. They're not perfect, but they don't fund terrorist groups the way Iran does. They don't sponsor attacks on American forces. They don't chant death to America. Saudi Arabia should be the leader of the Middle East. They have the resources. They have the military capability. They have an interest in stability because instability hurts their oil exports. But American dependence on Saudi oil gives them too much leverage over us. When we need oil, we have to care about their security. We have to protect their infrastructure. We have to maintain military presence in the region to keep supply lines open. If we were energy independent, we could support Saudi Arabia as a regional partner without being dependent on them. We could let them lead the Middle East without having to do it for them. Democrats have made that impossible through their corruption and their refusal to allow American drilling. And now, with the Ras Tanura refinery shut down, you're going to see gas prices spike. You're going to feel it in your wallet. And when you're paying $5 or $6 a gallon, remember, this didn't have to happen. We have the oil. We have the capacity. Democrats just won't let us use it because their personal financial interests are more important to them than your ability to afford gas. This is criminal. This is betrayal. This is exactly why Americans are sick of career politicians who serve themselves instead of the people. Trump wants to drill. He wants American energy independence. He wants to free us from dependence on Middle Eastern oil so that conflicts in that region don't directly impact American families. Democrats want to keep you dependent so their Saudi investments stay profitable. It's that simple. And you need to remember this when gas prices explode and Democrats try to blame it on Trump or on the war or on anything except for their own corruption. That's what created this vulnerability in the first place. So let me walk you through 40 years of American foreign policy failure in the Middle East so that you can understand just how significant what Trump did really is. It starts in 1979 with the Iranian Revolution. The Shah, who was friendly to America, who maintained stability in the region, gets overthrown by Islamic revolutionaries led by Ayatollah Khomeini. These revolutionaries storm the American embassy in Tehran. They take American diplomats hostage. They hold them for 444 days while Jimmy Carter tries negotiation and diplomacy and a failed rescue mission. The hostages finally get released the day Ronald Reagan is inaugurated, because the Iranians knew Reagan might actually do something about it. But the damage was done. The Iranian regime was established, and from that point forward, Iran became the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. They funded Hezbollah in Lebanon. They funded Hamas in Gaza. They funded Shia militias in Iraq. They funded Houthi rebels in Yemen. They provided weapons, training, money to every group that would attack American interests or American allies. And for 40 years, American presidents dealt with this through half measures. Reagan fought proxy wars. Bush Sr. ignored them. Clinton tried containment. Bush Jr. invaded the countries on either side of Iran, Afghanistan and Iraq, while leaving Iran untouched, even though Iran was funding insurgents, killing American soldiers in both countries. Think about that. We had hundreds of thousands of American troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. We knew Iran was providing IEDs that were killing our soldiers. We knew they were training militias. We knew they were coordinating attacks. And we did nothing. We stayed in Iraq and Afghanistan fighting insurgents while the country funding and coordinating those insurgents got a free pass. Why? Because our military leaders and political leaders said taking on Iran directly would be too expensive, too complicated, too risky. Better to fight the proxy wars forever than to actually eliminate the source. That's 40 years of thinking. That's the mentality that got thousands of Americans killed for nothing. That's why we've been stuck in the Middle East instead of focusing on real threats like China and Russia. Obama made it even worse with the Iran nuclear deal. He gave them billions of dollars. He gave them sanctions relief. He sent pallets of cash, literal pallets of American currency, loaded onto planes and sent to Iran. And what did Iran do with it? They funded more terrorism. They accelerated their nuclear program. They expanded their regional influence. They laughed at us while using our money to kill our soldiers and our allies. Trump pulled out of that disaster in his first term. He reimposed sanctions. He took Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Quds force. He took his ass out. He showed strength instead of weakness. But the regime stayed in power. The system stayed in place. The terror funding continued. Biden went right back to appeasement, tried to restart the nuclear deal, gave them more money, allowed them more freedom, treated them like a normal country instead of a terrorist regime. And now Trump is back, and on February 28th, he ended it. He eliminated regime leadership. He cut the head off the snake that's been poisoning the Middle East for 40 years. This is what should have happened in 1979. This is what should have happened in 2001 when we invaded Afghanistan. This is what should have happened in 2003 when we invaded Iraq. But it took Trump. It took someone with the courage to actually solve the problem instead of managing it forever and sitting on their asses. And you know what this means? It means we can finally get out of the Middle East. For 40 years, we've had massive military presence in the region. Bases in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. Aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf. Tens of thousands of troops rotating through combat zones. All because we were managing the Iran threat, containing Iran, protecting allies from Iran, fighting Iran's proxies. Now, Iran's regime is collapsing. Their leadership is dead. Their ability to coordinate regional activities is compromised. Saudi Arabia can step up as the regional leader. They have the military. They have the resources. They have the interest in stability. They don't fund terrorism the way Iran does. Let Saudi Arabia lead the Middle East. Let them maintain regional security. Let them deal with the remaining threats. And America can finally pivot to where we should have been focused all along. China and Russia. China is the real threat. They're building their military. They're expanding globally. They're challenging American economic dominance. They're stealing technology. They're preparing for eventual conflict over Taiwan. Russia is expansionist. They invaded Ukraine. They're threatening NATO allies. They're the only other country with a nuclear arsenal that can threaten America. Those are real threats. Those are where American military and intelligence resources should be focused. Not on managing Iranian proxies in Yemen or Syria or Iraq. But we couldn't focus on China and Russia while we were stuck in the Middle East. We couldn't pivot to Asia while we had hundreds of thousands of troops dealing with Iranian-sponsored insurgents. Trump just freed us by eliminating the Iranian regime leadership, by forcing regime change, by ending 40 years of failed policy. He's made it possible for America to finally move on. We can withdraw from the Middle East. We can let regional powers manage regional problems. We can focus our military on actual peer competitors who threaten American dominance. This is what real strategy looks like. This is what happens when you have a president who thinks long term instead of just managing crises. Every other president for 40 years accepted that the Middle East would be a permanent American commitment. That we'd always have troops there. That we'd always be fighting Iran's proxies. That we'd always be managing that threat. Trump said no. He said, we're ending this. We're eliminating the regime. We're freeing ourselves from 40 years of failed policy. We're moving on to the real threats. And despite all the media panic, despite all the predictions of disaster, what's actually happening is that American foreign policy is finally being freed from a commitment that should have ended decades ago. This is leadership. This is courage. This is what America needs. And it's something no other president in 40 years had the testicular fortitude to do. Now, let's talk about what comes next and why Saudi Arabia needs to step up as the new leader of the Middle East. With the Iranian regime collapsing, there's going to be a vacuum. Someone needs to provide regional stability. Someone needs to counter remaining terrorist groups. Someone needs to manage the security architecture of the Middle East. That someone should be Saudi Arabia. Not because they're perfect and not because they don't have problems, but because they're the best option available and because they have the resources and the interest to actually do the job. Let me explain why. First, Saudi Arabia doesn't fund the kind of terrorism that Iran does. Yes, there have been Saudi citizens involved in terrorism. 15 of the 19 9/11 hijackers were Saudi. But the Saudi government itself didn't sponsor terrorism the way Iranian government does. Iran's entire foreign policy has been built around funding proxy groups. Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Houthi rebels, Shia militias in Iraq, all funded, trained, and coordinated by the Iranian regime. Saudi Arabia doesn't do that. They fight against these groups. They've been bombed by the Houthi rebels, backed by Iran. They've dealt with ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They're targeted by the same terrorist organizations that Iran supports. This means Saudi interests align with American interests in a way that Iranian interests never could. Both countries want stability. Both want to eliminate terrorist groups. Both want secure energy supplies and open trade routes. Second, Saudi Arabia has been a help against terrorist organizations in recent years. They've worked with American intelligence. They've conducted operations against Al-Qaeda and ISIS. They've provided funding and military support for counterterrorism. Are they perfect partners? No. Are there things about Saudi society that Americans find objectionable? Of course there is. But in terms of actual security cooperation, they've been significantly more helpful than problematic. Third, Saudi Arabia has the resources to actually lead the Middle East. They have the largest economy in the Arab world. They have modern military equipment. They have the oil wealth to fund regional security initiatives. Iran was always a destabilizing force, using their refunds to fund chaos. Saudi Arabia has an interest in stability because chaos hurts their oil exports and their economic development. A stable Middle East is good for Saudi Arabia, which means they have every incentive to actually work toward regional security instead of undermining it the way Iran did. Fourth, Saudi Arabia under current leadership is reforming. Mohammed bin Salman, has been opening up Saudi society, reducing religious police power, allowing more freedom for women, trying to diversify the economy beyond oil. It's not perfect. It's not Western democracy, but it's movement in the right direction. And it's a hell of a lot better than Iranian theocracy, where women are beaten for not wearing hijabs and homosexuals are executed. If we're going to have a regional leader in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia reforming toward moderation is a much better option than Iran spreading revolutionary Islamism. Fifth, and this one's critical, if Saudi Arabia leads the Middle East, America doesn't have to. We can partner with them without having to be responsible for everything that happens in the region. For 40 years, America has been the de facto leader of the Middle East security. We maintained the bases. We patrolled the shipping lanes. We enforced stability. We fought the wars. That's over. Trump just ended it by eliminating the Iranian regime that was the primary threat requiring American military presence. Now Saudi Arabia can step up. They can maintain regional security. They can counter remaining terrorist groups. They can partner with other Gulf states to provide stability that the region needs. And America can support them without having to do it. We can provide intelligence, we can provide weapon sales, we can maintain some presence for cooperation. But we don't have 100,000 troops deployed. We don't have to be fighting constant counterinsurgency operations. We don't have to be the ones responsible for every security problem in the region. That's the future Trump just made possible. And Saudi Arabia stepping up as regional leader is the key to making it work. But here's what Saudi Arabia needs to understand. They can't just benefit from Iranian collapse while expecting America to do all the work of maintaining regional security. They need to lead. They need to take responsibility. They need to build their military capability and their regional partnerships to the point where they can actually manage the Middle East security without constant American military presence. If they do that, if they actually step up and lead, then everyone benefits. The region gets stability. America gets to focus on real threats. Saudi Arabia gets to shape regional affairs according to their interests. But if they don't, if they expect America to keep doing the heavy lifting, well, they're just benefiting from the stability. Then we're right back where we started, stuck in the Middle East forever because no regional power is willing to take the responsibility. Trump has created the opportunity. He eliminated the Iranian regime. He freed American foreign policies from 40 years of failed commitments. He made it possible for regional powers to step up. Now, it's on Saudi Arabia to actually do it, to lead, to take responsibility, to prove that they can manage Middle East security without requiring permanent American military presence. If they can, we're finally free. If they can't, we're stuck there forever. And that's the test of the next few years, whether Saudi Arabia and other regional partners can actually provide the stability the Middle East needs, or whether the Iranian collapse just creates more chaos that pulls America back in. I think they can do it. I think Saudi Arabia has the resources and the interest to actually lead, but they have to want it. They have to commit to it. They have to build the capability and take the responsibility. That's the next chapter. And that's going to determine whether Trump's elimination of the Iranian regime actually frees America from the Middle East, or whether we're just transitioning from one endless commitment to another. Let me bring all this together so you understand the significance of what just happened. For 40 years, American foreign policy in the Middle East has been a failure. We've managed threats instead of eliminating them. We've fought proxy wars instead of dealing with the source. We've committed endless resources and American lives to a region that should never have required permanent American military presence. Every president from Carter to Biden failed. They failed to solve the Iran problem. They negotiated, they sanctioned, they gave money. They fought Iran's proxies while leaving the regime untouched. Trump ended it. On February 28th, he eliminated the Iranian regime leadership. He did what no other president had the courage to do. He cut off the head of the snake and forced regime change in the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. Yes, there are consequences. Iran struck back. They hit Saudi oil infrastructure. Prices are going to spike. There will be economic impact. But those consequences were always coming. The question was whether we'd face them from a position of strength with Iranian leadership dead and the regime collapsing, or from a position of weakness with Iran fully in control. Trump chose strength. He chose to act first. He chose to finally solve the problem instead of managing it forever. And the path forward is clear. Saudi Arabia needs to step up as regional leader. America needs to pivot focus to China and Russia. And we need to finally end 40 years of permanent Middle East commitment. The Israeli influence over American policy needs to end. We need to make decisions based on American interests, not on bowing to Israel demands. Israel can defend itself without American soldiers doing their fighting. Democrat oil corruption needs to be exposed. Their refusal to allow American drilling, their financial interest in Saudi oil, their willingness to keep American dependent on foreign energy. All of it is betrayal of American security and American consumers. And Trump needs to be recognized for having the courage to do what had to be done, what should have been done decades ago, what every other president was too weak to attempt. This is leadership. This is what America needs. This is why elections matter. Now, I need you to understand something about this platform and why your support matters. Corporate media won't tell you this story honestly. They won't praise Trump for eliminating Iranian regime leadership. They won't expose Democrat oil corruption. They won't criticize Israeli control of American foreign policy. They'll spin it. They'll panic. They'll predict disaster. They'll do everything possible to make Trump look bad, instead of acknowledging that he just did something 40 years of presidents failed to do. I'm telling you the truth. I'm giving you analysis that serves American interests, not corporate interests. And I can only do that because I'm independent. Because I don't answer to advertisers or donors or political handlers. Because I am funded by you, the audience that values the truth. That's why I'm asking you to support our Stand Against the Silence campaign. Visit TITDUSA.com and go to TITDUSA.com campaigns Stand Against the Silence. Silence is no longer neutral. In a world where corporate media lies to you, where truth is buried to serve political agendas, where honest analysis of American foreign policy gets you called anti-Semitic or unpatriotic, silence becomes cooperation with the lies. I'm not silent. I'm speaking the truth about Iran, about Israel, about Democrat corruption, about what Trump just accomplished. And I need your support to keep doing it. Donating to Stand Against the Silence sustains independent media that won't bow to corporate pressure or foreign influence. It keeps honest foreign policy analysis alive. It protects speech that powerful interests want silenced. Your support says truth still matters, American interests come first, independent voices deserve to exist. You can also support Truth in the Darkness Network on YouTube, Spotify, Patreon, and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe, share the content, leave reviews, help us reach more people who are tired of corporate media lies. Every subscriber, every donation, every share helps us build something that can compete with the corporate propaganda machine, that can tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable, that can serve American interest instead of serving powerful lobbies. Thank you for standing against the silence. Thank you for supporting independent media that refuses to bow down. Trump just changed 40 years of failed foreign policy. He eliminated the Iranian threat. He created the opportunity for America to finally get out of the Middle East and focus on real threats. That's the truth. That's what happened, and we're going to keep telling it. Visit TITDUSA.com, support the Stand Against the Silence campaign, subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Patreon, and Apple Podcast. Stand with us, support the mission, refuse the silence, and I'll see you next time.